Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Julie and I mostly make content surrounding topics such as music, makeup, as well as mental health. Today's video is music related, of course, because it is an album review and I've been super excited to do this album review as well. Beyond that, this pertains to the band Movements. Movements is one of my favorite bands. They are one of the most mental health focused bands I know. Before I get into the review, I just want to explain how I tend to perceive and review music. I'm not a music critic. I'm not rating music. I'm not going to be talking too much about instrumentation and analyzing those musical elements. Instead, I'm going to be focusing on the overall content lyrically on this album and the passion that Pat puts into the vocals here. My reasoning for this is I'm a fan. So I'm reviewing this album as a fan, and beyond that, I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. So when I am taken aback by music in a good way, meaning that it makes me feel certain emotions, it's typically tied into some sort of mental health topics within the lyricism that I relate to. Okay, let's get into it. So, today we are reviewing Movement's newly awaited album entitled No Good Left to Give. This album was released today, which is Friday, September 18th, 2020. It's about 44 minutes in length and contains 12 tracks. And I noticed Pat specifically requested that no one shuffle the album upon initial listen, and I definitely agree with that. Beyond this, when I was looking into the lyrics on this album, I read that Pat described the theme of the album as feeling like you're always the person to end up with nothing left to give in a relationship, and feeling like that person would be so much better if you were just dead. So this is heavy. I do want to put a little trigger warning out. I'm not going to get detailed beyond the lyrics or talk of my personal experiences, but there are triggering topics pertaining to suicidal ideation on this album. Now, when it comes to this album as a whole, there are a few different themes that I noticed in the realm of mental health. Specifically, I noticed a lot of talk about suicidal ideation. I noticed mention of depression. I know Pat personally lives with depression and anxiety. He did speak on his anxiety. He spoke on his anger. He reflected on numbness that he's experienced for years due to his depression, and how even though these feelings are painful, he's at least glad he's feeling them. That's very common for him to talk about on this album, and I think it's an important concept that a lot of us can relate to. Beyond that, the album is about relationships. It's about a specific dynamic in a relationship, how it went down, how it affected Pat, and his own internal demons, as well as the individual described in the songs. Moving forward into the tracks, I don't want to go track by track and get into too much depth here, but I do have some notes. So track 1 is the opener of the album. It is entitled In My Blood, and one of my favorite lyrics on the album is on this track. Now excuse my language, but Pat says in this song, "I feel so fucked, at least I'm feeling." So this goes back into this theme of Pat is someone who struggled with numbness and feeling emotionally numb in situations where he knew he should be having some sort of emotional response. So even though he has this sort of off, uncomfortable feeling, he is expressing gratitude for being able to experience the feeling. And I think that is a really, really powerful lyric, and gets me feeling very emotional from the very beginning of this album, which it's Movements, so I wouldn't expect anything less. Moving forward into track 2, entitled Skin to Skin. This was the second single released for the album, so I have had some more time to listen to it. When I first heard this song, I felt that the instrumentation was a little overpowering to Pat's vocals upon first listen. I don't feel that way anymore after listening to it now. I also appreciate this track more now, knowing that the concept of it actually does fit perfectly into the album and it does belong here as the second song, since we have an opener and then we have a song encapsulating this romantic relationship with some tumultuous tendencies. So tracks about one-night stands to me are not very unique. Musicians do this all the time. But the difference is with Movements, there is a flair to this track because it caused significant emotional turmoil for Pat, and not because of the situation, but because it allowed him to reflect on his own life and his own past and his own internal struggles with mental health conditions. Moving forward into song 3, I'm gonna try not to cry while I talk about this. This is my favorite song on the whole album. I had a feeling it would be. This is the song, Don't Give Up Your Ghost. It fits perfectly as the third track. It absolutely should come after Skin to Skin, which is more of a lighthearted song, even though there's some more darker concepts in the lyrics. You're in your head when I'm next to you. I have written down with me. Yeah, when you live with mental health conditions, you have a lot of intrusive thoughts, and a lot of us, especially myself, struggle with traumatic experiences from my past that I'm working on healing and letting go of. And I can be in a situation and trying to be mindful and just not be present because I'm in my head. So Pat is describing the individual he's dating as being in their head, and he's noticing this. And not everyone notices that people who struggle do these things. I think the reason Pat himself would pick up on something like this is because he does have these struggles, so he knows the warning signs and he knows what some symptoms look like that other people may not pick up on. He depicts in this song that he sees this person fighting the demons in their head every night and encourages this person to find the beauty in life despite their grief and pain. The term "don't give up your ghost," to me, my opinion is that it represents, instead of trying to push away past demons, traumas, what have you, whatever is eating away at you, try to find a way to accept them. And I don't mean you have to like them. I mean radically accept them. I don't like this, but I'm working toward accepting them. Once we have that radical acceptance in place, we can move forward to actually address and confront these demons. So essentially, to me, "Don't Give Up Your Ghost" represents, instead of numbing the pain, which as we know is a common thing for Pat from what he's described, allow yourself to feel that pain instead. This song is so important because so many of us are just running away from how we feel, running away from the darkness in our past and the pain and how much it significantly hurts, but we can't. It's not us. It's not who we are. Our traumas, our pain, it doesn't define us, but we do have to confront it at some point. Tunnel Vision. Tunnel Vision is also one of my favorite songs on this album. I knew it would be because I would theorize it is the most mental health focused song just because it digs really deep, in my opinion. This was the third single that was recently released for the album. There are themes of depression and suicidal ideation on this track. Specifically, we have the line, "Send my illness into the trenches, desperate to end this." So what Pat is saying, in my opinion, is this illness is a part of him that he tries to hide and he's ashamed of and he doesn't want it anymore. And I'm sure almost all of you out there with mental health conditions feel that way. No one wants to live with anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, PTSD, what have you, whatever you are dealing with. No one wants to live with that pain because it negatively impacts our functioning, our energy, our mood, our well-being, and it negatively impacts the people around us and our relationships because having these mental health conditions can cause so many issues in our relationships. It's so hard for us to take care of and love ourselves, and then putting that effort forward into someone else can be really complex when we're not taking care of ourselves. Pat also mentions two other emotions on here. He mentions being angry and he mentions being tired, and being angry and being tired are important emotions to talk about, and they absolutely tie into depression. So I'm glad that's depicted on this track as well. To me, this song doesn't beat around the bush. It's not trying to cheekily represent something. It's talking about mental illness 100% directly without being afraid to confront the topic. And it's done in such a beautiful way that just connects the audience, so me and anyone else who likes Movements, with Pat and the band and these words. I really just think his uncleans on this track especially stand out too, and vocally I am very pleased with Pat. I don't have much to say about Garden Eyes, so I'm moving into 12 Weeks. 12 Weeks. So the track 12 Weeks is the 6th track on this album, and it discusses a tumultuous romantic relationship of sorts, which is the main theme of the album. The person's constant anger every night is disrupting their inner peace. And there's a theme on the album where Pat talks a lot about his peace being disrupted, or his inner peace that he wants to find or wants to restore and come back to. And that's something very personal to me right now, and something that I'm fighting so hard to get. And it's really hard when we have people in our lives who are triggers for us or treat us a certain way. It's really, really difficult for us to recover. And in order to benefit from recovery and move forward, we really do need to find our own inner peace. There is a dark theme on the song with the lyrics, "Sometimes I wonder if I died, would you live a better life?" And remember that Pat previously said that's essentially the major theme of the album. So this individual is experiencing suicidal thoughts / suicidal ideation, however you want to define that, and feels like a burden to this person, and that they are ruining their life and their life would be better off without them. And that is such a painful experience, to love someone else, to care for someone else, to want to be there for someone else, but you don't even want to be here anymore because you feel like all you do is hurt people and let people down. That's really powerful, and I'm just so appreciative of Pat talking about this topic, even though it's heavy, even though it's emotional, even though every time I put this album on I just feel like I'm gonna cry my eyes out. It's okay. I'm literally working on the skill of radical acceptance myself and accepting my emotions. That's the coping skill I'm working on, and this album is getting at the same concept. It's just incredible. It really is. On to track 7, we have Living Apology, and in my opinion, this song gets at the catalyst attempting to hide the flawed and darker sides of themselves from others. Pat appears to be afraid to become this person, again with the theme that he doesn't want to burden or push away other people. There's a line about semblance. Semblance is another word for appearance. So what Pat, I feel, is trying to say is that he needs to appear a certain way around others in order for him to feel safe. And this makes so much sense. This song completely connects to mental illness because essentially I think the darker parts of himself that he's hiding and holding in are the symptoms of his mental illness that he feels are part of who he is at this point. And being afraid to show that vulnerable, in pain side to someone else, especially if it's someone who doesn't have mental health conditions, makes a lot of sense. And this is something I deal with personally, of knowing what kind of person I can be when my symptoms are flaring up and I'm not taking responsibility for my actions or my feelings. And it's really hard to hold all of that in and hide it from other people. I wrote, holding back my anxiety and pain at times can be unbearable and ultimately worsens my symptoms in the long run. Therefore, I feel a lot of empathy for Pat. I didn't connect too much to Santiago Peak just because it was about Pat's childhood and where he grew up in places that feel different now but will always hold a special meaning to him. I still love the song, love this album as a whole, and have zero complaints at this point as a fan. But just personally, I don't love where I grew up, so I can't really connect that piece. The next track, Seneca, his childhood crush becomes engaged and he focuses on that. That's probably my least favorite track on the album, but I think it's just because I haven't fully wrapped my head around what it's about yet. So if you know what that song is about, more so than just the main theme I mentioned, please let me know. On to track 10, we have Moonlight Lines. And I have this in all caps, this lyric. I've been desperate to feel at all, experiencing numbness after a breakup. Pat describes, my emptiness felt so alive. It's as if He was aware what he was doing would eventually make him feel worse, meaning that he was being in this relationship to fill the void, to fulfill his chronic emptiness so that he didn't have to live with it. And in the moment, it soothed that pain and the feelings he was experiencing, but ultimately it wasn't long lasting. Verse 2 specifically on this track I really, really like because it's spoken word and it's very powerful. I like the line, "The glass is always empty because that half of me has died." And that's exactly the point. He made this decision to fill that empty void, and he's feeling worse after. He's feeling heartbroken, he's feeling worse, and it's less to me, I think, about losing this person and more about what he's discovering about himself and how he feels about who he is as a person along the way, and those are painful realizations to come to. Track 11, "No Good Left to Give," was a simple, short song with piano. It's also the title of the album. The song seems to pertain to loving someone who doesn't reciprocate and an unhealthy situation that drained the catalyst to the point that they feel too drained to put any more good out into the world. It encapsulates feelings of emptiness as well as hopelessness. The final track, "Love Took the Last of It," pertains to blaming oneself and having that inner peace disruption again. And it is very common for Pat on this album to blame himself because he was the one who ultimately decided to be in this relationship. The piece I like about that is he's taking responsibility for his actions and his emotions. He's also explaining the emotional reasoning behind the behaviors he decided to engage in. But at the same time, I feel so much empathy for Pat in this situation because he's saying, at the time, it's what I needed for a stable mind. And that makes sense. A lot of us turn to our maladaptive coping mechanisms so that we can be more stable and we can handle things better, because going to therapy and getting mental health treatment is hard. Yeah, it's really freaking hard. It's like a full-time job to do your little homework and everything. It makes complete sense why we fall into these coping skills. I like that there's a line, "Will I ever have enough to give?" Because I feel like there's a little glimmer of hope in there of maybe one day things could be different. Even if he doesn't feel that way now, he's open to the possibility that maybe one day things can be different. And just because his life has gone a certain way up until this point, it doesn't define who he is going forward and what he does going forward. My final thoughts on this album is it's freaking beautiful. Movements is one of the best bands in the whole entire world. This is coming from a fan wearing gray makeup to match the album cover. I wanted with all my heart to speak on this album, and I'm sorry that this might be a little long, but this validates me. And I hope if you're out there and you're living with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and eating disorder, whatever it may be, I hope that this album validates you too. I hope this album makes you feel less alone. I hope that Pat's words, if they do resonate with you, one, I'm validating that that's painful and I'm very sorry, but two, I'm glad, because understanding our emotions and accepting them and processing our thoughts are all part of healing. And you're on your way to healing by listening to this album. That's what I think. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel as well. Please comment down below letting me know what you thought of the album. You can follow me on my social medias. My Instagram is Julie_counseling. My Twitter is Julie Counseling with no underscore. And my Facebook page will also be linked down below in the description. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye all!